We know the legend of Babylon, a city of hanging gardens and reaching towers, a byword for legendary wealth and untamed decadence. It is often painted as a place of sensual abandon, a Mesopotamian paradise where human desire flowed freely, unshackled by the moral chains that would later constrain the Western world. We picture a society of sacred prostitutes and formidable, seductive queens, a civilization in its prime, where the body and its pleasures were celebrated without shame, but true history is inscribed not in myth, but in clay and law. What if this seductive image of Babylonian sexual freedom is a profound illusion? What if, beneath the veneer of legendary decadence, lay one of history's first and most ruthless attempts to legally codify absolute control over the human body, specifically and ruthlessly, the bodies of women? This is not a story of liberation. It is the story of how a civilization wielded the power of legislation to transform intimacy into a commercial transaction, desire into a criminal liability, and the female form into a vessel of state-regulated honor. Welcome to the courtroom of Hammurabi, where your body was never your own. To understand this system, we must first shatter the myth of the sensual East and confront the stark legal reality. Babylonian society, under the famed Code of Hammurabi, was not a hedonistic free-for-all. It was a rigid patriarchal hierarchy, obsessed with property, pure lineage, and unassailable social status. In this world, sexuality was never a private matter. It was a public concern with direct and severe consequences for the economic and social stability of the family, and by extension, the state itself. The body, especially the female body, was the primary site for this legal regulation. The Code's 282 laws constructed a reality where every facet of sexual life was governed by a brutal, unyielding calculus. At the very heart of this system were the concepts of the bride price and the dowry, not mere sentimental traditions, but legally binding contracts that framed marriage as a definitive transfer of legal authority over a woman from her father to her husband. A woman's virginity was a tangible commodity. Her fidelity was an insurance policy on the legitimacy of her husband's heirs. But this was merely the foundational layer of an intricate system designed to enforce social control through codified terror. The Abandoned Historians channel unearths the darkest secrets of the past. If you dare to uncover what lies buried, subscribe now and let us be your guide. This system's most brutal logic was reserved for the crime of adultery. For an elite woman, an affair was not a personal betrayal. It was a capital offense against her husband's property rights and his public honor. Law 129 of the Code is chillingly direct. If the wife of a man has been caught while lying with another man, they shall bind them and throw them into the water. The accused lovers faced a divine trial by ordeal, being cast into the sacred Euphrates. If the river gods rejected them and they survived, the husband's honor was restored. But the intended overwhelming outcome was a watery grave. This was the state's ultimate sanction for a transgression of the flesh. Yet the law's true, insidious genius lay not in its overt harshness, but in its meticulously calculated double standards. This was not a system of blind brutality. It was a cold economic calculus applied to the human form. If a married man consorted with an unmarried woman, a slave, a prostitute, or a social inferior, it was not classified as a crime against the institution of marriage. The Code treated it as a minor financial transgression, a simple matter of settling a debt. Law number 158 is starkly revealing. It addresses a man who, after his father's death, has relations with his own mother. The punishment is not death, but mere exile from the family home. The legal architecture was not designed to enforce a universal sexual morality, but to protect the property rights and uncontested bloodlines of powerful, propertied men. A woman's body was a sealed vessel, its integrity paramount. Any violation was a catastrophic breach, demanding a violent, purifying response. A man's body, by contrast, was an instrument of his will. Its stray actions were mere operational expenses, conveniently settled with a payment of silver. This created a grotesque legal reality where a husband could legally drown his wife for infidelity, while he himself faced little more than a modest fine for the same act, framing adultery not as a mutual sin, but as a woman's unique and catastrophic betrayal of her owner. This profound horror extended far beyond adultery, corrupting the very definition of consent in the ancient world. In a society where women were perpetual legal dependents, first the property of their fathers, then their husbands, the concept of rape was framed not as a violent assault on a person's autonomy, but as a trespass against a male citizen's estate. Punishments varied dramatically, not based on the trauma, terror, or physical harm inflicted upon the woman, but solely on her market value, as defined by her marital status. An assault against a betrothed virgin was a capital crime, as it irreparably destroyed her bride price and her future husband's exclusive rights. The law was compensating for a commercial and social loss, not seeking justice for a victimized human being. If the victim was married, the assailant was executed, but the law mandated that the woman be put to death alongside him if she did not cry out for help, a chilling provision that held the victim responsible for her own violation. The law saw her not as a person with agency, but as a piece of property that had failed to sound its own alarm. Perhaps the most psychologically complex and insidious aspect of this system was the regulated existence of the Naditu women. These were priestesses of the highest birth, dedicated to the sun god Shamash, who were formally forbidden from bearing children. They resided in cloistered religious institutions called gegums, walled compounds that were both a sanctuary of privilege and a gilded cage. While they could engage in sophisticated business ventures, amass personal fortunes, and wield economic influence unheard of for most women, their biological destinies were subject to the state's rigid control. Their sexuality was strictly policed to prevent pregnancy, a direct contradiction of their natural potential. To solve the problem of lineage, their husbands or male relatives were legally permitted, even expected, to produce heirs with enslaved women or secondary wives of lower status. Yet in a stunning legal fiction, the children born from these sanctioned concubines were then formally recognized as the primary heirs of the Naditu herself. This was a system of such meticulous social engineering that it could legally reassign motherhood, turning the wombs of its most elite women into a matter of cold state and religious policy. Their mandated barrenness a perverse feature of their exalted status. The legacy of Babylonian sexual law is a dark and deeply entrenched one, its echoes resonating across millennia. It established a powerful legal precedent that would directly influence the harsh sexual codes of the Hebrew Bible, with its intense focus on female purity as property. These concepts, in turn, filtered into the early foundations of Roman law and permeated aspects of later Christian doctrine, which absorbed and adapted these ancient anxieties about female sexuality. The Code of Hammurabi created an enduring blueprint for using the full force of legislation to enforce a rigid gender hierarchy, one where female sexuality was perceived as a volatile and dangerous force that required constant, violent supervision to prevent societal chaos. The Code, so often hailed as a landmark of legal progress and the dawn of the rule of law, was simultaneously a sophisticated instrument of profound, systemic oppression, proving that codification can sanctify injustice as easily as it can dispense justice. The silent, imposing diorite stele in the Louvre, therefore, does not whisper of a liberated or decadent Babylon. It stands as a stark, polished monument to one of humanity's first and most successful attempts to chain the untamable chaos of human desire with the cold, unyielding links of statute. It reminds us that the foundational pillars of civilization, agriculture, writing and law, were also built upon the systematic, legal and brutal subjugation of the human body. With the female form as its primary battlefield, this control was not a peripheral side effect. It was a central, calculated project of statecraft. Its long, cold shadow stretches far longer and reaches much deeper than the crumbled dust of any mythical hanging garden. The rules for the body, so precisely etched in stone 4,000 years ago, continue to whisper in the silent spaces of our own courtrooms, our social prejudices, and our most intimate fears, serving as a chilling testament to the enduring power of a society to inscribe its deepest anxieties directly onto the flesh of its people.